back with me, it's like constantly checking, oh, what's the husband doing?
Yeah.
Like, okay,
No thing.
Partridge, you know your
Whining about something.
Partridge, you know your big Kit Kat?
What's that?
You know the big Kit
Yeah.
Kat? That was my brother.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Do you not
Of
even know
course.
who gave you a Kit Kat?
I remember. I did not know that was your
It
brother.
was Aiden and Bethany, and Aiden was my brother.
Oh God, that was a classic. That Kit Kat was huge.
Yeah.
Did you eat it all?
It was nearly 10 pounds. Yeah, I just sat there and just ate the whole thing.
Yeah, it's one city.
No, I had an aide, and so she cut it up. And it was basically what they did is they took like the sugar wafers, seen those with that little, that like a frosting, like two little wafers over the top. And they stacked those up and they must have put like 10 pounds of chocolate over it.
Well, he also tweeted about you this summer.
What's that?
He also tweeted about you this summer.
So we started fan club.
You clearly
We should.
did. Yeah.
Jane Partridge fan club.
It's I don't know. A membership of
$100 a day.
as long as I get my cut, as long as I get a cut.
All funds go to you, your fan club.
You can start an actual YouTube channel. Like,
What?
there are
Yeah,
other
that's
history
not-
people. That's just straight
I
up.
do have a YouTube channel.
Just straight up and start doing it.
Daily vlog of your life.
But you can be more like organized about your YouTube.
One of the reasons people with really boring lives. Okay, so, let's do the test. I got most of people did really well on it. And I know some of the questions were close to each other. I just wanted to give enough kind of a variety. And so there were 3 short IDs. I got a few. Some people missed none on the multiple or the matching. I didn't expect people to miss a lot, but that was a good one. So nice job. Everyone, are you proud of yourself? Tomorrow in study hall.
I'm putting in 4th period.
4th period. You're leaving bio.
Yep, I'm not, but.
No, I want a Kit Kat now. Now I'm hungry. No, we cut that up, and it was literally, it was about this big. It was nearly 10 pounds of Kit Kat. And so we cut it up into pieces, and it was literally a mound like that big. So, everyone in the classes could share it. Yeah, it was good. It had almost no sugar. It was almost like eating celery. It took more calories to chew it than.
Well, he was.
It was so rich. It was so much sugar.
He was like, does Partridge ever mention my Kit Kat? And I was like, that was you?
That is so funny. I just didn't, Of course, then again, I'm getting old. But I can tell you what I did in 4th grade.
Partridge, I'm convinced you're
That's
I've got a few years left, and I'm done.
Are you a vampire?
Huh?
Are you a
I'm near
vampire?
retirement.
You can never retire. You're not allowed.
Oh, God.
Like a super.
Well, then I would retire.
Like you're just magic.
Just a home eat Kit
Right
Kat.
in your hand.
Does anyone not like Kit Kats?
Maybe if you start a YouTube channel, you can get a Kit Kat for it.
Yes.
All right, so
We start a YouTube channel.
let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this, and then I'll give you a little bit of time to work on your assignment. Everyone has now picked stuff, so we all have a topic. Yes.
I have a question about that. So if we're doing like a film, can Aaron like a bunch of research on both of our things? You could not in with it.
Yeah, what I would like is if you could turn in some kind of, just an outline.
So if we did a script, we could turn that in.
That would, a script or an outline of your presentation. That's the only thing I'm gonna ask, just something like that. So there's some people are just gonna do a paper and one presentation. But if you're doing 2 presentations, just give me your outline. And it could be just a few words. I know what you mean. Or your script. I want your script. I mean, that's something. There's a copyrighted. There's a movie rights. So if you trust me, yes.
I still need to pick one.
You need what?
I still need to pick one.
Oh, you said pick one. Let me look at the ones. Let's do it right. I'm gonna do a couple things about myths, and then I'll just try to repeat the work. We'll go through which ones. There's still a lot of good ones. Hmm?
I still remember when you did your presentation
Mary.
on confidence and
But she didn't say that during the meeting.
you got it?
She wasn't here. I know she's. I know.
I wanted her so badly.
She's paging at the.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I can do that in like 3 weeks. I know, hold on. It's my birthday.
Paging is really interesting, but at the same time, it's not. It's like exceedingly boring, but also interesting at the same time. And you want to be the last week, because that's actually when they do it.
They have a rule that you're not allowed to testify as a agent, and Margaret did 2 years ago testify.
Oh, really? I didn't know.
He like used Cody Hoover. He got up there and he was like, as a lifelong like conservationist, and you testified, and you don't to like. So now you're not allowed to testify if you're a page.
That's so sad.
That's kind of garbage, but.
Like you go in, they're like, do not speak.
That was an issue.
Especially legislators are pretty anti-environmental, so I can see that really getting them mad. They hate young people.
Yeah.
They hate you. All right, here we go. So we got a couple fables. I will talk a little bit about the couple things. We got the fables. We got to hare. I kept calling it the fox and the hare. And let's go to a couple more things. And I love folk tales, but folk tales, these are a little bit more of explanation, but they're more trying to relate to everyday life. Everyday life, what's going on. They might be real stories. They might be like stories of like partial truths and then embellished. So like Pecos Bill is a good example. Davy Crockett would be a big one. Davy Crockett was a real person, but they invented this whole story and this elaborate thing about him killing a bear when he was 3. So okay, that was partially to make him a Whig politician to counter Andrew Jackson, but it would become just a huge myth by the 1950s and probably the most popular television show of the 1950s, named, as luck would have it, Davy Crockett. And who's this?
That's
Johnny Appleseed, real person, a Democrat, actually a Republican, and then would become a Democrat. Thomas Jefferson's Republicans, and then they became the Democrats. I know. But he was believing that people should have small farms, and so so he went into Ohio before a lot of settlers followed, and he planted apple seeds, thinking that will help small farms. So he's a real person, but then it turned into this whole kind of folk tale and myth. And Pecos Bill, who's really the story about a cattle rustler from Texas, which turned into this kind of mythical cowboy. And there's some other ones. There's a lot of them. And I was like these as a little kid. Folklores are a little bit different. These are stories based upon cultural ideas, and they're more about stories. It's more to look at it about what makes a society. And they're trying to find the good things about that society or the bad things. You know, this is why we are. And that's why I put down, the practices of the people, the beliefs. That's why here's John Henry, one of my favorite stories. You know the story John Henry? And this is in front of a tunnel in Tennessee, but he was a man, one of the great, he could work a drill faster than anybody else, hammer and drill to make tunnels for railroads, and he would compete against a steam drill, and he beat the drill, but died while beating it. This great story, but it's also about, this started in these,
Doesn't he have a different name? Because I don't remember it as John Henry. I remember it as like something else. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all John Henry. It could have a different name. The one I was doing was John Henry. And here, John Henry. And the whole point about this idea, these came from these small little mining communities, and the hardworking miners are felt mistreated, and then they're someday going to be replaced by a machine, and they're trying to show the value they took in their own work. It's one of my favorite stories. I love John Henry as a kid. If you haven't heard that, that's, I'm sure you've heard another story. Did you ever hear stories if you didn't hear John Henry? I had a little book. I love that book. There's my story. I had a book. And then let's get to legends. So legends, these are a little closer to myths in a way, but they got certain elements of fact. There's certain elements of truth to them. There's bits and pieces, but then it lends them some kind of historical credence. So that's like a historical event, or it's the actual historical event. Some people believe these are true, but it's kind of then these unknown things. A lot of legends. For example, if you had to read the Iliad or the Odyssey, for Greek history, that's a legend. There's elements of truth there. It's a great story. Beowulf, another one, elements of truth. Two of the most famous ones, I put Arthur second, even though Arthur would actually come first chronologically, but King Arthur, sometime in the 6th century after the Romans had left Britain, and this story about this king and the chivalry of his court at Camelot, the search for the Holy Grail. It's a great legend. There might have been an Arthur, probably based on a Roman general. We're not really sure. There's all kinds of stories about that, but it would become this great myth. And then probably one of the most famous is Robin Hood. And virtually every society will have a Robin Hood. Some kind of Robin Hood, somebody who does what?
Who steals from the rich and gives to the poor, so it has to be in the house. And I think we should do it one day.
So that's a good political statement. Yeah. And for example, in Russia, one of my favorite is Koba, same kind of thing. Koba, who did the same. And there's a lot of stories about this. And Robin Hood, we don't know, it's obviously a legend, but there probably was a nobleman who is at a time when Richard the Lionhearted went to the Third Crusade. And he left his brother, King John, in charge, and to pay for the crusade, they had to raise taxes. And he fought against the raising of the taxes, and that's how it came about. So Prince John's the villain, and each of these little areas was called a sheriff, and so the head of it was a sheriff. So the sheriff of Nottingham was a villain. And if you know anything about the Robin Hood story, there's elements of truth, but a lot of it's legend. And it's very English, so they all have long bows. Why they wore green. That one, there's all kinds of stories about why. And there's some really, really bad movies about Robin Hood. And if you ever watched one with Kevin Costner in it, I feel your pain.
Have you seen the Robin Hood Men in Tights?
Yeah, the Mel Brooks one, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I saw that one at the theater. I'm a big Mel Brooks fan, yeah.
I lived in a city where like the original shop, like not anymore.
Say it again.
I lived in a city where the original Robin Hood got like in Spain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was really crazy because it looks like it's from.
Where's it at?
I don't remember. Pretty sure it's in Spain. No, it's in Italy, and it's in like northern Italy.
I could see that because of the mountains. It's really,
Yeah,
it's
but
really pretty there.
They kept it like completely like preserved up like the movie shot. Like there's like a well and everything, and it's like a functioning town.
It's amazing how some of those
Like,
movie
there's
sets,
McDonald's. It's crazy.
they become big tourist attractions. Not surprising at all. Little John, doesn't look like he's wearing ears. But anyways, I just thought that picture was funny. But these are kind of the beginnings of myths. And there's a lot of legends. And they're all elements of this. But let's get to a myth. And I'm not going to talk about Paul Bunyan, but I have him up there. Because Paul Bunyan is kind of, people think Paul Bunyan are all of these. From a fairy tale to folklore to legends. I mean, they think he's all of them, folklores. But someone that's doing Paul Bunyan, so I'm not going to talk about Paul Bunyan. But what is a myth? So a myth is really to try to explain what happened. To give it a story, in a way to glorify it, to make it more special than what it was. And so it has elements of all of these things I've talked about. It has elements. But some of it can be used to make somebody appear better. It can be used to justify an event, to justify an action. A big one is to justify something you want to do that might actually be kind of immoral. To make people believe something. And every country is going to have founding myths. And the United States is loaded with them. And myths become problematic because a lot of times people don't know if they're true or not. And what can they be made to justify? What can they glorify? What can they make seem better than it actually was? And if you believe myths, then what's the truth? What's that? The myths are?
Yeah.
When they become the truth, then you never know what the real truth is. And we talked a little bit about conspiracy theories, but I think you can see a direct line to that kind of thinking. But don't get me wrong. I think some of the myths are great stories, but they blur the line between what is real and what's not. So let's talk about a couple of the myths, and some of these are going to be really big. We're not going to do Paul Bunyan. So let's get to the first one. Okay, I just put this up there because I thought it was funny. There's a myth going around that Walt Disney, along with others, had their head cryologically frozen to preserve it so that eventually they could put it on a body as science has changed. Now, the reason I started with this one was, first off, I thought it was funny, and whoever put that picture in has a very dark sense of humor that I, of course, had to use. But, no.
That's why they released the something before they released Frozen 3. If you type in Frozen Disney, come up. And now if you type in Frozen Disney, like on it, else.
I mean, there's also Disney on Ice, which is kind of suspicious.
Both are very, so you basically say the myth is true.
Yes.
Yes.
Didn't Ted Williams or that baseball player?
Yeah, Ted Williams supposedly paid somebody to do it, and it turned out to be a total scam.
Oh, really? So he's not actually going to. Okay. But like he wanted to do that so that like once science got, he thought that once science got like advanced enough, they could bring him back to life.
Like he wanted to hit me there.
Are there some people who do it though?
Huh?
Does anybody actually do it?
There's a firm that does it, some people to do it, but it turned into this whole myth.
How much does it cost?
Huh?
How much does it cost?
Well, I would argue that,
For free, but you can put anyone in the freezer for free.
Yeah, I know, well, like,
let's not go there. This was recorded.
blur it out, edit it, blur it out.
Yeah, we just have somebody's voice come in. We should order pizza. Okay, so
I have one in my freezer.
my guess is I would not go to a cut range cryogenic head freezing place. 2-for-1 deals, avoid those. But this is the kind of the myth about, and the whole thing about it is it implies this myth of these kind of crazy billionaires who seem to be kind of like above everybody, to have this either great knowledge or they're a little bit wacky, and that's what made them the ability to get incredibly rich. And this whole myth about the way the other half live, how other people live, and especially some about people who don't have much, because they look at it like, God, those crazy billionaires. It kind of gives them cover to do other stuff, is the point. And I just want to show that picture. So let's get into some real myths about somebody, the same kind of thing, the great man myths. And we got to talk about George Washington, because there are so many myths about the great man. Now, somebody's doing Columbus. We have somebody talking about Columbus and the great man myth. So I'm not going to do Columbus. But this whole thing about like, somehow they are bigger than life. They're heroes beyond belief. There is somebody who everybody attacked, everybody ridiculed. They might have even tried to overthrow, yet they persevered. And George Washington proves that. The reason why the great myth is such a big deal, the great man myth, it implies only certain people, and it's almost always a man, only this man could do these great things. What does that say about most people? You can't do it. So there is a hierarchy. It is natural to have some people on top and everybody else below. And that's why the great man myth, and George Washington, I'll just give you the example, will put them above. It's actually pretty pernicious. It can really have a great effect on a republic, because it convinces most people my voice is not as important as their voice. And this was done in this glorification of the country after it was done 1830s or so, glorification after the War of 1812. The country survived, the expansion westward. The feeling was the United States has made it, but it's getting divided, and to find something to unify it. So Parson Wean was write this whole story about George Washington, and many of these things I was told. And here it is, the life of George Washington and curious anecdotes. And it was also the great man thing is, okay, you can't ever be him, but act like him. You should add one more thing. Once you make them into the great man, who no one else can be, can you criticize him? It becomes really hard to take a good look at your history and say, wait a minute, George Washington was great, but he actually did some kind of bad things. He did some really bad things. And this might shock you. There's people out there that do bad things. Yeah. And this says you can't criticize him. You can't criticize him because he was a great person, so shut up. By the way, history is not supposed to just go back and find bad things about people. Look at the bad things they did. But we're trying to show that we have a complex history, we learn from them, and that's the reason we do have problems and also great things today, and how we build from there. Speaking of that, so for example, let me give you the first one. The story was that George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, and his father, Augustine Washington, confronted him on this, and George could not lie. He could not lie, and said, in fact, George Washington never could tell a lie. He admitted, I chopped down this cherry tree. And that shows the value of honesty, that he is the last true honest man, and teaches a lesson to you. So first off, I had to show this very creepy picture of Parson Weems. There's his father, and look at young George Washington. Look at the face. Doesn't that look exactly like the 68-year-old man on our dollar? Okay, so, what a poor kid. Now, first off, that's complete garbage. This story is totally made up. Washington did tell a lie. Yes. And they're trying to, this is a lesson for people to be honest by telling them a what? Yeah, here's a lie to teach you to be honest. Oh, thank you. So have you heard the chop down the cherry tree one?
Is the actual tree?
Yeah, chop it down.
He did actually.
No, we don't. I'm sure he cut down the tree sometime in his life.
Yeah.
But this story was completely 100% made up.
How do you know that?
Huh? Yeah. You weren't?
Oh, I
Don't forget, I had to go look at the crazy 12-year-old with the face of a 68-year-old. Oh, God, that is creepy. That's hilarious. Next, there's this great story how he visited Betsy Ross when Betsy Ross was sewing the flag. In fact, if you look at that flag right there with the dragon, that was the actually first flag of the United States of Betsy Ross. That's the flag of Wales. That flag. We call it the Betsy Ross flag. And she supposedly sewed the first flag. And George Washington visited and approved that first flag. What did I say? You have a problem with that? Hey, Parson Weems wrote when the dictionary was brand new. See how I just roll into the lie? Okay. He went twice. I gotta change that. That's gonna bug me. That's gonna bug me all day. You guys are laughing, and I had no idea what you were laughing at. So. Huh?
Yeah, Kate actually made out of slaves.
Not made out of slaves.
Well, I mean, kind of.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, you might teach slaves on the one feet, and then I'm like, no, you're right.
Okay, ready? Let's go back. There we go. So, was that true? Oh, well, maybe. No, totally made it up. In fact, we don't even know if Betsy Ross had anything to do with the flag.
Wait, really?
No idea.
I feel like my whole life is lying.
Yeah, I've been to the Betsy Ross house.
So have I.
Yeah, like, I was saying, like,
So have I. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Might have nothing to do with the actual flag.
I really don't do it.
Don't get mad at me. I let you visit this classroom.
Yeah, that one was creepy. Why are all the kids?
That's George Washington. So that flag, no, yeah, we have no idea. Betsy Ross could have been told, it appears to be totally fabricated. She might have sewed flags, but probably almost had nothing to do with that design. But this whole story about Washington coming and approving the flag, no.
Is that Washington in the road?
That's
Why
Washington.
does he, that's who?
That's Washington.
Yeah, why does he look younger in that than the other one?
He actually started out really old.
And then he
Yeah, I know. This Haley's more accurate because he, this doesn't seem that accurate. And why is he wearing this wig? Yes, did George Washington have wooden teeth? We already answered that. I heard that while I was typing that it could have been made out of a number of things. Wooden teeth was occasionally used. It could have been, there were ivory carved teeth. They were for the very rich, but they weren't. They were used for like special occasions. For day-to-day activity, what did they use? You said. They would yank the teeth out of slaves, yes. That's his teeth. They are.
Okay.
That's it. That's a picture of them.
Why? Why would you put someone's teeth on display?
Huh?
Why would you put someone's teeth on display?
Because the story about George Washington's false teeth is one of the more famous stories. So, yeah, and almost certainly they were ripped off from slaves. I mean, we're not 100% sure, but part of the reason they had him with wooden teeth, he was humble. Even though he was very wealthy, he was a humble man. No, he was a bastard slave owner who had his teeth and slaves ripped out so he could have teeth. Yes.
So, they just like, so his mouth that was like a hole, so they took his teeth out. And he died. I don't know.
Washington?
Yeah, like how did they just like, I think they have hard.
No, these were false teeth. They had a little metal thing and he fit in.
It's like that. Oh, I was like.
They're like dentures.
Yeah.
No, they didn't pound them in.
Like.
Actually, they did try to do that. And let's just put it this way: people had a lot of more pain tolerance than, let's say, your generation. But I didn't. I mean, just for fun.
Well, I mean, you were alive back then.
I don't like to brag.
What are you?
Don't get it up. But yeah.
Okay.
Yes. What?
I'm like confused because like if his teeth were falling out, like weren't the slaves' teeth falling out, or these like his slaves' teeth?
Well, part of the thing about teeth, they weren't all from one person, so they'd be from multiple slaves. But yeah, they were younger men.
Yeah, because like
They
when
just
had
rip
their
them out.
age, their teeth would decrease too.
But didn't
Well-
he also like own a tobacco plantation? And like wasn't that like a
Tobacco and sugar.
Yeah.
But if you don't have sugar, a lot of tooths get from some sugar, and slaves never had access to sugar.
No.
And they would do young men and yank your teeth out. And then Washington's teeth were coming out, and that was a big business. You know, you find a good dentist who could yank your teeth out. And what made a good dentist? Fast. You can cut that teeth, and get it out. And I don't like to think about it, and then stitch it real quick.
I thought they did in the military too. When my dad was in the military, they had to keep his wisdom teeth out. They would make him buy a piece of leather and just pull it out.
And do what?
When my dad was in the military, they had to take his wisdom teeth out and then make him bite down on a piece of leather and they would kill him and then take it out. Are we off the subject? Yeah.
He's a better man for it. So, but another one. Here's one of the most famous stories. Valley Forge, that horrible winter of 1780, I have to get my years right. 1777, 1778. And George Washington, the army is running out of food, men are deserting. They're in these little hovels. The British still hold Philadelphia. They had terrible defeats outside of Philadelphia. And there's this whole mythology. There are posters. In fact, the people in this building have the poster of George Washington kneeling in prayer at Valley Forge for divine guidance. And so this is just so many pictures of this. And this was in Parson Means. Now, the reason Parson Means put that in there is because the Second Great Awakening was starting. And this wave of a new style of religion was sweeping the United States. But we know this is, well, let's put it this way. Not 100% certain, because as you probably can guess, I was not there. I know you've all put me there, but I'm not that old yet. But we know this because he was a deist. And if you don't remember what deism is, they believe that the universe was created by a creator, the creator, and the creator started the world, or started the entire universe off, and then sat back and watched. And so they believe there was a creator, but then the creator had no direct interaction within human society. We have to decide for ourselves. of the Enlightenment. Once Newton came out with the theory of gravity, everyone's like, "Whoa, the creator must be a great mathematician," literally, and that's it. And so everybody went. He was an Anglican. He would go to the Church of England, but he just would go to Anglican sermons. He never once used the word God. Never. A deist uses the word creator. And look at the Declaration of Independence. It says nature's God, but it also says creator. Those are deist terms. So you have a more religious time in the 1830s. So what are they trying to say? The founders were more religious. Does that make sense? People do that all the time now. That's part of the reason why people have this today. Because they want to say the founders are more religious, so we should be more religious. Or vice versa. You can be religious or not religious. But this is not true. Oh, I have that. I forgot to type that down. He's a deist. And here's another one. I've had a lot of people tell me this. He lived in the White House. Did he live in the White House? It would have been hard because not only was it not called that in the first place, but secondly, it wasn't built yet. He was not there. He was in Philadelphia and New York were the capitals. Now, 1791, the bill was passed to create the District of Columbia out of Washington or out of Virginia and Maryland, and that would be the capital would be built. And it was just a swamp. So they literally had to make a city from scratch. And that would be built in 1800. He was already there. So it's an almost absolute certainty he didn't live.
What if it's dead body right now? Oh yeah,
Well, after seeing that creepy face he had as a child, he very well could be there. Yeah.
Who was the first president?
Who was first president? 1800. Who lived there?
Thomas Jefferson. No, John Adams.
John Adams. Because remember about presidents, they might be elected. Jefferson was elected in 1800, but he wasn't inaugurated until 1801. And that's a party trick I have. You name a year and I can tell you who was president.
1707.
Huh? Steve McQueen. So that was actually where the first executive mansion was, New York City. It was just a house. And I've been told by this people, where did George Washington? So the first time I toured the White House, that's the time I got nearly assaulted by a Secret Service agent. But yeah, in the columns outside the front door, there are still bullet holes from the War of 1812. And you're not supposed to take pictures in the White House. But I was.
In the bathroom. That's what me and my mom did. We went to the bathroom and took a picture in the bathroom.
Okay, that's pretty funny. That's really funny. I like that. But I thought since I was outside, I could do it. But I was standing on the front porch and I did one of these kind of, and I pulled out a camera. This was still a 35 millimeter camera. This is pre-digital camera. Well, yeah, the first digital cameras were just literally coming out of big monstrous things. But I had a regular camera, and I like this, and out of nowhere there's a Secret Service agent. And they're all over. You can't see them, but they're everywhere.
They let us take a picture outside the West Wing.
What's that?
They let us take a picture outside the West Wing.
That was, yeah, maybe because I was still on the porch and still could be. He might have thought I was going to go take a picture back inside. I bet that's what he thought. But I was like, and yeah, that's when LBJ was. They would always have secret agents around there, and Lyndon Johnson. They had agents all over. So if you look at the White House, they're agents, but you can't really see them, but they're all over. And they're in suits. It's just amazing how they can blend in. But there's a story, the Secret Service agents outside, and I know I've told the story before, but I have to tell it now because I'm committed. And they had every night about 3 a.m., Lyndon Johnson would come out of the back portico, the back top of the column, the little porch. There's a deck out there. And every night about 3 a.m., he'd come out and go to the bathroom over the side of it. Right? Every night at 3 a.m. So come out in the open and do it because he's Lyndon Johnson and do whatever he pleases. And so Secret Service agents are all over. So when a new one came, and they didn't know, they'd always say, okay, the new ones would be the ones at night out there, knew the person. And they'd always say, you got to stand right here. You can't move from this spot, right here. And so they'd be there, and Lyndon Johnson would greet them at about 3 a.m. in the morning. Okay. That's a little gross, but still funny. So, let's get to another myth, the Puritans. This will be the last one. I love these myths. These myths I just think they're just amazing. And I was told this, that the Puritans, and this includes the Separatists, which everybody calls the Pilgrims. Nobody called them Pilgrims then. The Puritans, and they came here for religious freedom, to set up a nation where all people can practice the faith they want to, or no faith that they don't want to. And so with that, the Puritans came here. And they established Massachusetts Bay Colony and for religious freedom because they're escaping persecution in Britain. Huh?
Weren't they also like, you don't follow us? You're like, committing the crucible. They have, it's kind of that if you not follow us. Yeah.
Well, because it's a myth. So, yeah. They wanted religious freedom to practice their own religion and nobody else's. They assumed everybody in Britain was going to hell, and they wanted to get out of there in the 1830s because they had a king they thought was Catholic. And so they left to form a religious theocracy where only Puritans would be there. Puritans were Calvinists, and they believed in something called predestination, where it's already been decided at the creation of the universe whether or not you go to heaven or hell. And this actually would become a very open religion, but at the time it was, we are the only ones who are going to heaven. That means we must prove it. And how do we prove it? They would lay out very strict rules on how you can act to prove you're one of the people going to heaven. Which, by the way, kind of contradicts the whole thing about it's been decided at birth. So, for example, it was the Puritans who banned Christmas. Why? Because Christmas was a drunken mess. What's the only holiday that matters to Christians? Easter. Yeah.
Wait, so what were the Separatists? They were like a sect of Puritans that like broke away, but like what did they believe in?
The Separatists, they were such strict Calvinists that they thought the Puritans who wanted to purify the Church of England, they were all going to hell. And so they're not strict enough, and so we will form our own. And they went to the Netherlands thinking, because it's a bunch of Calvinists there, and it turns out Amsterdam's crazy. And so they said, we got to get out of there. Let's go form our own place. So they did not. So that's why the crucible, that explains that. They're actually it's a pretty amazing thing. We'll get to religious wars. So this is what we do. I didn't give you any time today. Tomorrow, I'll do one more myth, and then I'll give you time to work and thought. Sound good? Is everyone happy with that? You're not happy? That hurts my feelings.
Do you want the truth?
Yes, the truth.
No, I'm not.
You don't want no time then?
I'm just not happy.
You're just not happy? You know what would help? If everybody had a 10-pound Kit Kat.
Yeah, agreed.
You ought to ask him how much chocolate he used, because it was like, he said, it was pounds of chocolate.
It makes your brother seem old and me seem really old.
Well, very model.